Let's begin our discussion of Ethernet by considering the history of Ethernet. Ethernet was developed by Xerox back in 1972. Xerox was trying to come up with a way for computers to talk to laser printers, and the result was Ethernet. Since that time, we've seen many different combinations and permutations of Ethernet. We can run Ethernet over unshielded twisted pair. We can run it over fiber optic cabling. Even in a wireless network, your wireless access point probably connects via Ethernet into the wired network. Your video game in your home might have an Ethernet connector on the back of it. I think we can safely say that Ethernet has become the dominant LAN technology as compared to some of its earlier competitors like Token Ring or ArcNet or LocalTalk. Today, most of our network devices are somehow going to involve Ethernet connectivity. And over the years, there have been a variety of ways that we could connect into an Ethernet network. A couple of the early approaches were called 10 base 2 and 10 base 5. The naming came from this. The 10 represents the speed, the capacity of the link in megabits per second. So Ethernet for many years ran at 10 megabits per second, and that was about it. The base in 10 base 5, 10 base 2, the base referred to the type of network connection. It was baseband as opposed to broadband. With baseband, the signal is taking up all of the frequencies on that medium. With broadband, we can have different channels carved out of our medium. Much like your cable TV, you can tune into different channels. That would be an example of broadband, but Ethernet used baseband, so it's 10 base 5. 10 base 2 as examples. And the 10 base 5, the 5 referred to the distance limitation, and the 5 meant 500 meters as a distance limitation. And the 10 base 5 cabling, it was fairly thick coaxial cabling. Some people called it garden hose cabling, and the way you would attach to that, one way to attach to that was you got this little device called it was called a vampire tap, and it literally went in, it penetrated the shielding, the outside of the cable, and it went in and it touched the core of the cable to make a contact, and then you would connect that to a computer. Sometimes there would be a little 15-pin adapter called an AUI adapter that you would use to connect to your end station, and this garden hose-like cable would weave its way through the office space in a building, and devices would tap in, literally, they would tap in to that cable. That was a fairly expensive way to do things. This is fairly thick, expensive cable. A more economical type of cable, a thinner cable, was used by 10 base 2. 10 base 2 was called thin net because it was a thinner cable. 10 base 5 was called thick net. In fact, 10 base 2, because it was less expensive, also became known as cheaper net. And you might guess 10 base 5, 10 megabits per second, baseband 500 meters. You might guess that 10 base 2 would be 10 megabits per second, and it is. Baseband, and it is. And you might suspect it stands for 200 meters. Actually, it doesn't. It's close. They picked 2 because it's close to 200 meters, but to be technically accurate, the distance limitation is 185 meters. So 500 meters for 10 base 5 or thick net, 185 meters for 10 base 2 or thin net or cheaper net. Today, though, we rarely see 10 base 5 or 10 base 2 technologies. We're most likely to see unshielded twisted pair, and there are even different categories of unshielded twisted pair depending on the gauge of the wire, how the individual pairs are twisted together. We could have category 3 cabling as one example. That was used in a lot of telephone, a lot of PBX installations. So when Ethernet using unshielded twisted pair came on the scene, people started using the existing PBX wiring, the category 3 wiring, to hook up computers. And that was great if we were running at 10 megabits per second. It doesn't work for 100 megabits per second, however. For 100 megabits per second, we need to go at least to category 5. And then we've got category 5E and category 6. It goes on. And today, we're probably going to be using something like category 6. We might be using category 6A to support gigabit connections in our network. Gigabit Ethernet. We've come a long way from the 10 megabit per second days. And as we go through the remainder of this module, we're going to see some of the different types of Ethernet that are out there today. Not all of them are going to run over copper. Some are going to use fiber optic. And we've got different kinds of fiber optic cabling if you remember our earlier discussion. We have multi-mode fiber, we have single mode fiber. Typically, Single mode fiber because it avoids the multi-mode delay distortion that we discussed. Typically, single mode fiber is going to give us a longer distance limitation than multi-mode fiber. Let's talk about that next.